At exactly 3:17 hours on April 9, 2026, the most strategically vital 21-mile chokepoint on Earth went dark. Not with a missile, not with an explosion, with silence. The automatic identification system transponders of 47 commercial vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz simultaneously flickered and died. On the screens of the USS Abraham Lincoln's Combat Information Center, operating under strict EMCON alpha emissions, control 190 nautical miles southeast of the Iranian coast. The radar picture transformed from a sea of green merchant blips into a black, empty void. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy had just executed Operation Bab al-Khalij, the Gate of the Gulf, and in doing so, had placed 20% of the world's daily oil supply behind an invisible iron curtain made of mines, missiles, and martyrdom. This was not a miscalculation. This was a message delivered in darkness, at 3 a.m. to every trading floor, every prime minister, and every aircraft carrier on Earth. The question the world did not yet know to ask was simple. Had the U.S. Navy already anticipated this exact moment? The answer, buried in the classified annexes of CENTCOM's Operation Persian Shield contingency plan, would reshape the balance of power in the Middle East forever. What happened in the next 19 minutes and 43 seconds was something no analyst, no think tank, and no satellite photo could have predicted. To understand why the Strait of Hormuz became the trigger point of the most dangerous week in 21st century history, you must rewind to February 28, 2026. On that date, a coordinated U.S.-Israeli air campaign, designated Operation Iron Covenant, dismantled Iran's nuclear infrastructure with 127 precision-guided munitions and eliminated the Islamic Republic's supreme leader and 7 members of the Supreme National Security Council in a single 90-minute strike package. The strikes, carried out by a combined force of B-2 Spirit stealth bombers operating from Diego Garcia, F-35I Adir jets of the Israeli Air Force, and Tomahawk Block V cruise missiles launched from 3 Virginia-class submarines in the Gulf of Oman, achieved near-total strategic surprise. Iran's response was immediate, ferocious, and from Tehran's perspective, existentially necessary. Within 72 hours, the IRGC had launched over 340 Shahd 238 jet-powered drones and Fatah-2 hypersonic ballistic missiles at U.S. forward operating bases in Bahrain, Qatar, and Jordan. Saudi Arabia's Abqaiq facility, the world's largest crude stabilization plant, processing roughly 5% of global oil supply, was struck by a Precision Quds-class cruise missile that traveled 680 kilometers at wave-top altitude, threading every Patriot battery in the kingdom. Simultaneously, Iranian naval assets, a constellation of Sina-class fast attack craft, Type 21 frigates, Ghadir-class midget submarines, and Shahid Mahdavi, the converted container ship functioning as Iran's forward naval base, sealed the Strait of Hormuz with a combination of M52 rocket-propelled rising mines, acoustic influence mines, and a dense layered anti-ship missile network anchored by College Far's anti-ship ballistic missiles, positioned in hardened mountain silos along the Zagros Range. 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, 2 shipping lanes, each barely 2 miles across, and now a killing ground. Global oil markets responded instantly. Brent crude spiked to $143 per barrel within 4 hours. The Dow Jones Industrial Average shed 2,200 points before the opening bell. Container shipping rates tripled overnight as Lloyd's of London suspended war risk insurance for the entire Persian Gulf. For 5 weeks, the world held its breath. On April 7th at 6:32 p.m. Eastern Time, President Trump announced a 2-week ceasefire with Iran, brokered through the emergency mediation of Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif and Army Chief General Asim Munir. The agreement, built around Iran's own 10-point proposal, stipulated that Tehran would immediately reopen the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for a halt to U.S.-Israeli strikes. Markets erupted. Brent crude collapsed 13%. S&P 500 futures surged 2%. But within 6 hours, the deal was already fracturing. Israel, which had never agreed to include Lebanon in the ceasefire terms, launched its largest strike package of the entire conflict against Hezbollah positions across the Bekaa Valley, the southern suburbs of Beirut, and the Litani River corridor. F-16Is and F-35Is flew 200 sorties in a 14-hour window. Iranian-backed Hezbollah command nodes, ammunition depots, and Radwan force staging areas were reduced to craters. Lebanon's health ministry reported hundreds of casualties within the first 12 hours. Tehran's response was instantaneous and deliberately ambiguous. The IRGC Navy issued a maritime advisory. All vessels wishing to transit the Strait of Hormuz must coordinate directly with Iranian armed forces. 2 Hellenic-flagged oil tankers that attempted to pass at dawn on April 8 without coordination were intercepted by a swarm of IRGC fast boats. 11 Bavar 2 carbon fiber stealth speedboats, each armed with C-701 anti-ship missiles and heavy machine guns, and forced back at gunpoint. The strait was closed again. And then, at 3:17 hours on April 9th, the AIS transponders went dark. Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN-72, a Nimitz-class supercarrier operating at the center of Carrier Strike Group 9. The tactical picture had already shifted to battle stations configuration 22 minutes before the AIS blackout. The AN-SPY-1D radar of the USS Bunker Hill, the Ticonderoga-class cruiser positioned as the strike group's primary air defense platform, had detected the characteristic emission signature of an Iranian College Fars anti-ship ballistic missile battery conducting a targeting radar warm-up sequence from a position near Bandar Abbas. This was not a launch, not yet, but it was the electronic equivalent of a sniper placing his finger on the trigger. At the same moment, the USS Oklahoma City, an improved Los Angeles-class fast attack submarine running silent at 400 feet beneath the surface 80 miles south of the strait, detected the acoustic signature of 2 Ghadir-class midget submarines leaving their pens at Bandar Abbas Naval Base. The Ghadir, a 120-ton coastal submarine with a draft of only 25 meters, is specifically designed for mine-laying operations in shallow littoral environments. Each carries up to 6 M52 rocket-propelled rising mines, capable of defeating the double hull of a modern supertanker. What the Iranians did not know was that USS Oklahoma City was not alone. 90 feet below the keel of the lead Ghadir, running in that submarine's acoustic shadow, using the Iranian vessel's own engine noise to mask its presence, was the USS Delaware, a Block IV Virginia-class submarine equipped with the large aperture bow array sonar system, and the Virginia payload module carrying 28 Tomahawk Block V missiles. The Delaware had been shadowing Iranian submarine activity for 11 consecutive days under CENTCOM's classified Trident Shadow protocol, a hunter-killer positioning doctrine specifically designed to neutralize Iran's mine-laying capability in the first minutes of any renewed blockade. Simultaneously, 20,000 feet above the cloud deck, a pair of E-2D advanced Hawkeye early warning aircraft were triangulating the radar emissions of every Iranian coastal defense battery from the strait's northern entrance to the Gulf of Oman. Their Link 16 data feeds were painting a real-time kill chain picture on the Abraham Lincoln's Aegis integrated displays, and the picture was alarming. Iran was not simply closing the strait, it was constructing a kill box. At 3:19 hours, Rear Admiral Thomas Beckett, commander, Carrier Strike Group 9, received the flash precedence message he had been authorized to act upon without further approval from Washington. The message, originating from CENTCOM Forward in Qatar, contained 3 words of an authentication code and a single operational order: execute Stygian Lance. Beckett had rehearsed this moment 40 times in digital tabletop exercises. He did not hesitate. Within 90 seconds, the following events occurred simultaneously across a 200 nautical mile operational area. The USS Bunker Hill activated its AN Spy-1D in full power mode, an electronic declaration of intent that every Iranian radar operator would recognize as a weapons engagement posture. Its Mk-41 VLS battery, loaded with 80 Standard Missile 3 Block IIA interceptors, went to readiness condition 1. 2 EA-18G Growlers from Electronic Attack Squadron VAQ-141 Shadowhawks, airborne on combat air patrol since 2100 hours the previous night, swept into a pre-planned electronic warfare corridor above the northern Gulf. Their AN/ALQ-99 tactical jamming pods, cross-queuing with the next-generation AN/ALQ-249 next-generation jammer pods, unleashed a broadband electromagnetic denial wave across the frequency bands used by Iranian coastal missile battery fire control radars. On every college FARS battery operator's screen from Bandar Abbas to Jask, the radar picture disintegrated into digital snow. They were effectively blind. At the same moment, 4 MH-60R Seahawk helicopters, designated SAR escort, but configured with AN/APS-153 multimode radars and AGM-114 Hellfire missiles, launched from the USS Abraham Lincoln's flight deck and accelerated at 160 knots toward the intercept coordinates of the 2 Ghadir-class submarines. The Seahawks were not their primary weapons. They were the sensor layer for what came next. The USS Oklahoma City, having tracked the lead Ghadir submarine to within 400 meters, activated its AN/BQQ-5 active sonar in a single, devastating pulse. The effect inside the Iranian submarine was instantaneous and psychologically devastating. The sonar ping, transmitted at 200 decibels, shook every frame in the pressure hull and drove every crew member to their knees. It was the undersea equivalent of a pistol pressed to the back of the skull and cocked. The message required no translation. You have been found. You cannot move. You cannot fire. You cannot breathe without our permission. Both Ghadir submarines immediately began an emergency ballast blow and surfaced, raising white flags improvised from signal flags lashed to periscope masts. Iran's mine-laying operation had been neutralized in 4 minutes and 17 seconds without a single shot fired. But the operation was only half complete. CENTCOM intelligence had assessed with high confidence that Iranian IRGC divers, operating from Shahid Mahdavi, the converted container ship acting as a forward naval base, had already seeded an initial minefield across the primary northbound shipping lane in the strait during the preceding 48 hours. These were not conventional moored mines. They were MN-111 influence mines, bottom-lying acoustic magnetic pressure combination mines capable of discriminating between military and commercial vessel signatures and triggering only against high-value targets. A technical breakthrough obtained through North Korean technical assistance in 2024. To clear them, no surface vessel could enter the lane. No helicopter-deployed sonar could reliably locate them in the 40-meter deep, sediment-churned water, and no unmanned surface vehicle had the mission endurance for a full lane sweep. What the U.S. Navy had was something the Iranians had never gamed for. Operating from a Mark VIII Mod 1 SEAL delivery vehicle, a flooded, fully submersible torpedo-shaped insertion vehicle, 12 operators from SEAL Delivery Vehicle Team 2, detached to CENTCOM under Task Force 57, had been positioned inside the strait for 36 hours before the blockade resumed. They had been placed there on the direct orders of CENTCOM Commander General Marcus Webb, acting on signals intelligence indicating that Iranian mine-laying had been planned regardless of the ceasefire's outcome. The SDV operators were not there to fight. They were there to map, mark, and neutralize. Working in four-man teams with AN/PQS-2A diver sonar units and Mk5 neutralization charges, they had spent 16 hours moving along the bottom of the shipping lane at depths between 30 and 44 meters, locating mines by their magnetic anomaly signatures and attaching timed destruction charges to each one. At 3:47 hours on April 9th, exactly 30 minutes after Rear Admiral Beckett executed Stygian Lance, a sequence of 23 muffled underwater detonations rippled through the water column beneath the primary shipping lane. The shockwaves were felt by vessels 12 miles away but caused no surface damage. On the Abraham Lincoln's underwater surveillance systems, the mine signatures disappeared one by one like candles being snuffed out. The northbound lane of the Strait of Hormuz was clear. At 4:11 hours, the Lincoln's battle group made its move. The USS Nitsey, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, accelerated to 28 knots and drove a deliberate, aggressive transit of the cleared lane, bow cutting through the pre-dawn swell, CIWS systems in auto-engage, every Aegis radar online. It was a statement of fact delivered at full speed. The strait is open, and we are opening it. 22 minutes behind the Nitsey, the first of 4 tankers, a VLCC bearing the flag of the Marshall Islands MT Pacific Accord, carrying 270,000 metric tons of Saudi crude, began its transit under USN Escort. 2 Seahawks maintained overlapping coverage above the convoy. The USS Delaware paralleled their course 200 feet below, weapons hot. By 5:30 hours, the first tanker was through. The Strait of Hormuz was open. Iran's response arrived not through its navy, not through its missile batteries, both of which had been electronically castrated, but through its foreign ministry. At 6:45 hours Tehran time, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi issued a statement describing the U.S. submarine neutralization of the Ghadir vessels as a flagrant act of war and a grave violation of the ceasefire agreement. He warned that Iran's patience was not infinite and that the response to any further piracy in Iranian territorial waters would be decisive and disproportionate. Simultaneously, pro-Iranian telegram channels began circulating footage, later authenticated by U.S. intelligence, showing a Fayday-class submarine, Iran's most capable diesel-electric boat equipped with 533 torpedo tubes and JASC-2 anti-ship cruise missiles, slipping out of JASC naval base on the Gulf of Oman side of the strait. This was Iran's ace. The Fayday had never been deployed in a hostile posture before. Its operational range, its quieting technology, and its JASC-2 missiles, capable of striking a carrier at 1,400 kilometers, made it the single most dangerous platform in the Iranian arsenal that remained operational. And it had just vanished into 1,200 meters of deep water. On the Abraham Lincoln, Rear Admiral Beckett reviewed the intelligence summary with his strike group operations officer. The Fayday's last known position was 60 nautical miles east of the carrier's current track. The Lincoln's P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft were already aloft with sonobuoy patterns deployed in a 40-mile wide barrier. The USS Delaware was repositioned to prosecute the contact. 3 additional Mark 54 Mod 1 lightweight torpedoes were prepped on the aircraft elevator for immediate loading. The ceasefire held technically. No shots had been fired. But in the deep water east of the strait, an invisible chess match was being played at 400 feet below the surface between 2 submarines, one American and one Iranian, each trying to locate the other without being located first. The outcome of that silent duel would determine whether 20% of global oil supply flowed freely or remained held hostage to the political and military ambitions of a regime fighting for its survival. The lesson of the Strait of Hormuz crisis of April 2026 is not what happened in the 19 minutes of Stygian Lance. It is what did not happen. Iran's mine-laying capability was neutralized before a single mine could threaten a commercial vessel. because U.S. SEAL divers had been in position for 36 hours before the order was ever given. Iran's coastal missile batteries were blinded before they could lock onto a target, because EA-18G Growlers had been airborne on quiet alert since the ceasefire was announced, already preloaded with jamming frequencies gathered by NSA SIGINT teams over the preceding 6 weeks. Iran's submarines surfaced without firing a shot, because a Virginia-class hunter-killer had been riding their acoustic shadow for 11 days. The United States did not respond to Iran's actions. The United States had already pre-answered every move Iran was planning to make, days before Iran made them. That is the defining characteristic of 21st century naval warfare. The decisive engagement is not the kinetic exchange. It is the intelligence-driven positioning that makes the kinetic exchange unnecessary. The war was won not in the Strait, but in the signals intelligence reports filed 6 weeks earlier, in the mission planning cells at CENTCOM, and in the exhausting, invisible patience of 12 SEAL operators lying motionless on the bottom of the Persian Gulf in the dark. The fragile ceasefire remains. The Fayday-class submarine remains unlocated. The Strait remains technically open but functionally contested. Iran has not surrendered, and its 10-point peace proposal contains conditions that Washington and Tel Aviv have privately already rejected. The 2-week window closes, and when it does, the next escalation will not be a warning shot. It will be the real thing. The question is not whether you believe the U.S. Navy can control the Strait of Hormuz. It already has. The question is what happens when Iran decides that losing the strait is preferable to accepting the terms of a peace it considers a surrender, and launches the Fayday into a one-way attack run against CVN-72. What would you do? Comment below, because the admirals in Bahrain are asking the exact same question right now. Stay sharp. Stay informed. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a waterway. It is the pulse point of global civilization, and right now, someone's finger is still on it.